Welcome to the Minnesota Majority Report,
a program designed to bring you news not necessarily in the local media. News tailored to fit the busy lives of moms, dads, business owners, kids, everybody that wants to be equipped to be a responsible citizen, an activist in their community.
I'm Sue Jeffers.
And I'm Drew Emmer. Thanks for tuning in to the Minnesota Majority Report. We just endured one of the longest elections in the history of the state of Minnesota, and there's been a lot of controversy about the outcome. Joining me today is Jeff Davis, the founder of Minnesota Majority. Jeff, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Set the table for us. We had problems before the election even came about in 2008. Let's talk about how Minnesota Majority became interested in the issue and the early research on the problem.
Sure. Well, our initial findings into the election issues was really by accident. We were using a public version of the Secretary of State's voter registration file for doing mailings to targeted individuals. Many nonprofits throughout the state do this. They get a hold of the voter registration file and do mailings to voters.
So you're involved in a mail campaign, and you discovered some anomalies in the data.
Yeah, I mean, we found it strange that there were a large number of people that appeared to be, born that were over 110 years old. There appeared to be a number of people that were deceased that were on the list. And so we began doing a more thorough investigation into the voter registration rolls and found a number of concerning irregularities in the data.
So you bought a mailing list, and the mailing list had irregularities in the mailing list, and that came from voter information? Is that where the roots of this came from?
Yeah, basically any nonprofit or any citizen can get a copy of the voter registration file from the Secretary of State for $45. So they can go down and get a copy, pay $45, and you get a file with all of the voter information for the past several years on the file. And it was that file, provided by the Secretary of State, where we discovered these anomalies with the data.
So when you discovered these problems, what type of action did you take to address the problem? Did you contact the Secretary of State's office?
Well, it was at this time. It was about mid-October, and so there was an election upcoming, and we were concerned by what we had found in what impacts it might actually have on the election. We wanted to be sure that we had a clean election, and so we sent a letter to the Secretary of State on October 16th. Outlining some of the findings from our research, and we're awaiting a response.
And did you get a response?
Well, not the kind of response we would have expected. He called a press conference the very next day and tried to assure the state of Minnesota that we had the best election system in the nation. Instead of addressing the particular issues that we had outlined in our letter, he immediately appeared to go on defense and try to quell any concerns that we had raised about the information in the file.
Did you ever think at that point in the process, after you had sent this letter to the Secretary of State's office before the election in 2008, did you ever imagine that it was going to be this big of a deal, to the extent that the issue has become so far-flung and has actually made national news? Minnesota's been in the national news lately about this issue. Did you have any idea it was going to get this big?
I had no idea. At that time, our primary concern was to make sure that we had a good, clean election in November, and we had no idea as to what the election outcome was going to be, if there were going to be close races. Really what we wanted to do is to try to get the file cleaned up before people voted, so that we would be assured that there would be a good, clean outcome in the November election.
So then we had the election. The point is that there were problems with the data. There was problems with the process before the election even happened. The point is that Minnesota Majority didn't set out to create this problem.
Right.
It was concerned about accuracy and about election integrity. Then we had the election, and unexpectedly, it was an incredibly close election. I don't think anybody had any idea that it was going to be as close as it was. There were some things that happened around the election, shortly after the election, with regard to the Secretary of State's office. Can you tell us about that?
Well, we continue to, try to ask the Secretary of State to conduct an investigation into, some of the irregularities that we found, and they directed us to, send our issues to the county attorneys, that the county attorneys were really the people to do the investigation. And so we tried that. We sent a letter with an affidavit to
how many county attorneys?
30 different county attorneys, and asked them to investigate, what we saw as potential double voting, duplicate registrations, and we made several attempts.
What kind of response did you get to those letters?
We really didn't get much of a response.
So you sent 30.
A total of 6 county attorneys actually responded after multiple attempts. So after multiple letters, phone calls, a total of 6 out of 30 actually responded, and of those 6, at least half of them were dismissive in our concern. It didn't appear to us that they even bothered to investigate our complaint. Now, what's interesting about this is that under Minnesota law, when you present a county attorney with an affidavit of an election complaint, they are compelled to investigate. If they don't, they risk being charged with a misdemeanor and losing their office. So it's fairly serious. And to date, we still have the vast majority of these people that haven't even bothered to reply to our original request.
So then a number of months passed, and we finally had the canvassing board and the courts in Minnesota reach the conclusion that they reached, awarding the election to Al Franken.
Right. And
following the declaration of a winner in this prolonged outcome, what happened then?
Well, what's important to understand is that the whole recount process and what transpired there was all focused around the ballots, right? There was incredible security and scrutiny placed on the ballots, counting the ballots, recounting the ballots, which ballots are in, which ballots are out, what standards are employed, and nobody was paying any attention to voter registration information. So we said early on, during the process, that somebody should be looking at the voter rolls to see, do we actually have people that legitimately voted in the election, but rather all the attention was really placed around the ballots. Now, what happens after the election is that the counties take several weeks to update their record of actually who voted. So when you go to vote, you sign in on a voter registration roll, and then that information is updated into the central voter registration system, indicating that you did in fact vote on election day.
And how long does that take to get registered?
By law, it's supposed to be done within 6 weeks after the election. Okay.
So did that county update happen within the prescribed period of time?
No, it did not. I mean, Minnesota law basically requires that the records are updated within 6 weeks after the election. And we did not receive notification from the Secretary of State's office that the file was completed until late April, at which time we obtained a copy, which was supposedly the final copy that contained all of the election results from 2008.
So then you analyzed the data?
Absolutely.
And what did you find?
Well, the first finding was the fact that there were more ballots that were counted in the final election results than there were voter history records that accounted for who voted. There were approximately 40,000 fewer voter history records than there were ballots that were counted.
How many
in the election.
fewer?
40,000.
So 40,000 fewer voter history records than there were ballots cast.
That's correct.
Thanks for tuning in to Minnesota Majority Report, where each week we'll try to bring you a short course in an important subject for the good of Minnesota.
See you next week.
See you next week. Thanks.